I am the greatest.
Be water, my friend.
Okay, and welcome to One Hit Podcast, MMA Corner, Episode 2, talking about UFC 264, Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor in the Three Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada, on July 10th. Today I have a guest, a good friend of mine from the podcast world. He has his own podcast, the Martial Arts Show 2.0 podcast, Khalid, all the whole way from Germany. So he's our guest today for the breakdown of the fights. So welcome, Khalid. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on, and in general, thank you for everything. Your content is awesome, and yeah, I'm looking forward to have a great chat with you.
Brilliant. No, we'll mention your podcast at the end, who you're talking to, because you're talking to a lot of superstars in the world in the martial art game. But it's very interesting. So a couple of listeners want to listen on today. They can sort of follow you as well for some content. So UFC 264 is the rematch, the trilogy fight. The first fight was Conor, the second fight was Dustin, and now the next fight could be either or. We look back at that fight. It's 257, January 24th in Fight Island, and Conor lost. He got knocked out in the second round. What do you think went wrong in that fight? Because if you win the first fight in martial arts, you should win the second fight. So what did he do wrong?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, like a lot of people saying, and not when Conor fights, a lot of like people would say casuals always jump on that and analyze and stuff like that. But I think there are obvious things he did wrong, and Conor also admitted that. First of all, I think his stance, that he wanted to do it more in a boxing stance because he's heavy into boxing. I mean, we always knew he has good hands, and his boxing, if we probably would compare all the MMA fighters, he has probably the best boxing only from the MMA fighters. So, and I think that was a lot in his head, and thinking back of the Mayweather fight, getting more into boxing and having all, all that about boxing, want to make more money and stuff like that, and training a lot of boxing. So I think there was one thing, obviously. And then if it's really true that he never was exposed to the calf kicks, then that's also another thing, obviously. But that stance he had, the martial arts stance, the karate stance from his first fight, there will be also the solution for the calf kicks, because he can move in and out quick, and that would not bother him. And also he was too much in the pocket, and he was too close to Dustin. Dustin has good boxing. I don't think he has better boxing than Conor, but if you get close to somebody who has also good boxing and is maybe a little bit better in the grappling or in the clinch, that's a problem. And that's, I think in the bigger picture, what happens.
Yeah, as you're saying, the boxing, like Mike Tyson had a great quote: everyone has a plan to get hit in the face, and Conor had a plan, and Dustin Poirier in the second round clipped Conor and followed up with a few punches. And like you mentioned, the calf kicks gassed him. But if we rewind back to previous fights, his stance was, as you were saying, in and out on his toes. And maybe from the Mayweather fight, he's trying to prove that he is boxing. And like, there's different fighters out there, like Max Holloway, before McGregor fight, said he was the king of boxing in the UFC. There was Conor trying to prove that no, I'm the king of boxing. And did it backfire at the end? Like, does he have regrets? I'm sure, like every fighter you lose, you have regrets in game plan. Will he change next time, you reckon, or would he keep it the same game plan or adapt better?
Yeah, I think he will definitely change, but I also am sure Dustin Poirier expects Conor to change that. But I think because that's still a 50-50 fight. Just because either of them won one fight doesn't mean now Dustin 70% wins it and Conor just 30%. I think it's still a 50-50 fight. It depends on what Conor is, how his shape is, and if he's ready to go longer than round 1 and 2. Because when we think back to the rematch, Conor also had his moments in the first round, and Poirier even admit, that if Conor maybe would have followed up with certain combos, then he would be in trouble. So I think if Conor is really prepared and does his movement in and out, then he can win, because it's a rule in martial arts and in general in fighting. If you can't hit somebody, then you have a problem. So if he can't catch Conor when he moves in and out, and Conor connects all the time, that's a problem. So I think Conor is the only one he can decide how it goes. If he's really 100% mentally and physically ready, then I think he will win.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you mentioned the fitness. Like if you look back at the Nate Diaz fight, he lost in I think the second round, and then the
Yeah.
second fight he went 5 rounds. So would this fight be the same? Would he try to be smart, take his shots
Hmm.
more wisely, or will he try
Yeah.
and gas himself out? Because like I'm watching all his training videos on Instagram, and I know it's not the same, but it was actually happening in the background. But every video and every picture, it's punch and punch and punch, and like
Hmm.
Conor can kick, and he showed he has a good defense in the sort of the cage, the grappling against the cage, and his clinches. So will his fitness outdo him this time, or will he be smart enough to try and use his shots wisely?
Yeah. I think again it depends. When Conor is really hungry, if he really wants to prove that he is still the best or can be one of the best and wants the title shot next, then he will be prepared for everything. And maybe when he shows a lot of boxing, that's also a trick to, get people guessing, oh, it's just boxing. Because I remember when I had John Hackleman on my podcast, who, for the people who don't know, that was Chuck Liddell's coach, uh, UFC legend and light heavyweight champion back then, and now he's Glover Teixeira's coach. He will fight against Blachowicz in September. Back then, when the camera team came, he had Chuck everything doing the opposite. So he was
Yeah.
southpaw and did everything the opposite, and he never showed his true reach. So they always lied about his reach. When you look at the stats, that you see Chuck has a reach of 76 inches, which is not true. Chuck had 79 inches, so they always faked it a little bit. And that could be also a thing that Conor maybe does a lot of boxing, a lot of back work. So maybe Dustin and the team thinks, oh, he probably will still do a lot of boxing, and he prepares maybe a lot of kicking. So that could be a thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting with the Chuck Liddell. Like it's smart by the coach because you don't want to show all your hands. Like in poker,
Yeah.
you don't show your flush or your straight. You
True.
keep it close to
Yeah.
your chest. So the same in martial
Yeah.
arts. And like my big factor is, I think from the last fight, and I've been seeing a few martial art friends that we have Dustin Poirier from America Top Team, some of the best fighters in the world, and you have Conor
Yeah.
McGregor, which is SBG, great camp, great facilities, great people around, but they haven't got the top UFC
That's true.
caliber as American Top Team. So
Yeah.
if you're fighting and sparring every day with the best fighters, it would bring you higher. But then again, there's a background too. If you think about it, he won the 2 titles with SBG, he won it with John Kavanagh. So it
Yeah.
works. But does Conor have to do something extra and bring in fighters? Like I mentioned Mike Tyson again. Mike Tyson used to fly fighters all over the world and used to pay them
Mhm.
if they knocked them out. And he wanted to get knocked
Yeah.
out training. So he wanted a challenge. And like we don't want fighters getting knocked out because fighters get knocked out early. There's less fights for them and they quit fights
True.
and everything. But I'd love to see Conor bring in the better level fighters, the UFC top
Hmm.
10, top 15. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with other organizations, but I just like to see him bring in more, even boys
Hmm.
he's maybe beaten in the past. Like Eddie Alvarez, bring him into his camp. He mightn't have to
Yeah.
like it, but if he's sparring him every day, it should bring him to the next level, whatever that next level could be.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think it depends also again how hungry is Connor, because if you think about GSP, the TriStar gym, I mean, it's well known because of him and Faraz Sahabi, his coach, and Rory McDonald. But if we look at TriStar gym, a lot of people obviously were traveling to that, but TriStar gym, because it's in Canada, they also never had the really top guys all the time, like AKA maybe or American Top Team. It's just because of like Ireland,
Yeah.
it's too far away. And I mean, Canada is close to America,
Uh-huh.
but that's like the only gym. And what GSP did all the time, although he had, in my opinion, the best coach in the game, I think Faraz Sahabi is probably the best coach with Matt Hume. A lot of people say that. But GSP was traveling all the time. He trained with the Greg Jackson, and Winklejohn, and was traveling here, went to Thailand. And I mean, Conor has the money, so he can travel all over the world. He could even travel to Russia and work with, Olympic wrestlers or all sorts of that, or he can bring in fighters and pay them. But I think also the other thing is because he's a big name and he's the biggest star. Um, is he willing to do that? Like that's also like ego can play a factor and all that, because when you bring tough challenges in your training camp, you might get hurt or you don't like it. But GSP also said that in an interview with Ariel Hawani. So you can't be your boss in your training camp.
Yes.
And for guys like him, it might be difficult. But as much as a star as you are, and I know GSP was never that big star like Conor, although he's a big star, but not to that level. But you can be the boss in training camp. And I think that could be also an issue that Conor still dictates maybe a little bit his training.
I agree with you, Khalid. So if you had to pick right now, who's going to win this fight, Conor or Dustin?
I think if Conor is mentally ready, or if he's really hungry, then this time I think Conor wins. Because if Conor, I say honestly, if Conor this time doesn't win, honestly, if he ever fights again afterwards, I don't know if I can pick him again in fights. Because now it's 2 times in a row. And it's not like it's very bad or extreme crazy when the fighter loses 2 times in a row. But for a name or star like him, I think it will do something bad for his name too. Even though he will always make a lot of money and get his opportunities, but I think even for him 2 times losing is not good. It would be the same like if Habib would lose 2-3 times in a row. So, but that's why I think with all that in his mind, he will be 110% ready, and I think this time he will win. Whether it's a finish or it could be decision, I'm not really sure, but I think he will win.
Hopefully you're right. I think the first 2 rounds will tell all, and I reckon in round 3 it could be either one person winning or, as you're saying, decision. But it all depends on what Conor shows up. It should be a Conor applies pressure, and the stadium's going to be full. He lost his last fight, so as an Irishman, and all I want Conor to win, so I'm going to choose Conor. And then we'll move on to the co-main event. It's 2 former title contenders, Gilbert Burns and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. We both have both big fans of Wonderboy Thompson, and we had his father, Ray Thompson, on the podcast. Both of us. Who do you reckon will win this sort of number 1 contender fight?
I think Wonderboy, because I mean, Gilbert Burns has good wrestling, but it's not Usman wrestling. But his jiu-jitsu obviously is definitely superior level. But Wonderboy has one thing a lot of people maybe not know. He has Carlos Machado in his corner normally, who the Machado brothers and the Gracies, they're the best in jiu-jitsu. So he has that, so he will be very well prepared. But I think, and Gilbert Burns likes also to stand up a lot and try to prove. I mean, he would probably try to do takedowns and wrestle, but Wonderboy has good takedown defense. And I think the only person who can really give Wonderboy trouble in terms of wrestling would be only Usman. So I think if it keeps standing most of the time, Wonderboy will just piece him up, either dominant decision, or I can imagine when Gilbert Burns does a few mistakes and with level changes and takedown that he gets knocked out, because Wonderboy's kicks and in and out can get fast, or even his hands, his combinations when he angles off, like he dropped Masvidal with that. The same could happen to Burns as well. So in that, I think like 95% Wonderboy wins.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wonderboy, I think he has to win because Usman has fought everyone.
Yeah.
He's going back round.
Yeah.
We have to see that Wonderboy Usman fight.
True.
Like, Usman's a different level altogether. And hopefully in the near future we can have a podcast talking about that. But I agree with you, Wonderboy. And then the last fight, the sort of the main card that sort of picks out for me is Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Lewis Smoker. This is a great fight. It's a great matchup for Sean O'Malley. Like, Sean O'Malley is exciting.
True.
And like every fighter tonight, we've mentioned Conor, Sean O'Malley, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. They're sort of similar style fighters. The long stands, in and out, moving, kicking, punching. What do you reckon Sean O'Malley fight? Do you reckon he'll take it?
Yeah. Well, I think because he proved in his last time that he is still back. I mean, Chito Vera, he was, just at that night better. And we also saw that with Vera that he lost to Aldo afterwards, I think, with decision. He lost then 2 times, but now he's back on the winning. So I think that was, Sean O'Malley was also not really ready for the calf kicks, because the same happened with him, like to Henry Cejudo. But Henry Cejudo, because that wrestling durability, he pushed through that, and that's basically the only loss O'Malley has, and I think his striking and everything is too crisp. He's, like you said, like all the three fighters, Wonderboy and Conor and him, very crisp with the striking, very accurate. And I think unless something crazy happens or um, it gets to the ground a lot of times, I mean, he has good wrestling, but if his opponent is a little bit better than him in wrestling, it could be a problem. But I don't think O'Malley would lose. So I'm the same, like 95%. I think he will win. His striking, his timing is just too good.
Yeah, so I agree. It'd be good to see O'Malley is a superstar in the making. He just needs maybe
Yeah,
2 or 3 more fights to bring him that bigger level that he is now, because he's quite popular because of outside the fights and inside the fights. He's exciting inside and he's exciting outside. What he wears, his clothes, how he walks, how he talks, and the UFC need a star, and they need stars like of Wonderboy and Conor, and like there are
yeah,
mentioned like some Nate Diaz. They need all these types of stars, but like
definitely.
it's interesting to see the more and more UFC top 2 fighters, top 3 fighters, and champions are coming from that traditional background, either the karate or the taekwondo, which is great to see. Personally, between us two, because we're both taekwondo black
Yeah,
belt, and it's great to see that stuff that we're doing is working in the UFC.
definitely.
Because 10 years ago it wasn't working, but
Yeah,
you have to adapt. You have to get your BJJ specialists in, your Thai boxing specialists, your boxers in to have you bring at the next level. That's why GSP was so good, because he went everywhere: gymnastics, swimming,
hmm
running,
yeah,
over the boxing coaches. Like, it's important in the UFC that if you want to get to the top, you put in the effort. But like everything else, put in the effort, the rewards come back, don't they?
yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's the thing I always ask myself, and I know it can be as well a money thing, but even in his beginnings when GSP didn't have all that money, he was still traveling, trying to train with the best. And that's the thing for me, sometimes it doesn't really get into my head. I don't understand why certain fighters are just too lazy to, work on different things. Also, sometimes do your own research. What about mobility? A lot of people don't look into that, or if they have all the time knee injuries, maybe think about, do you have a bad foot position? Do you sit a lot? Do you do all these things? And I think these days with the internet, even if you don't have that money, you can research a lot and do it maybe along with YouTube videos for yourself, and improve. And then as soon as you have that money, save it and train with the best. And you have to be on your A game. And that's why the best of the best, they always improve, because they want to learn from the best and get every little detail in what makes them better.
That extra 1%. That's all
Yeah.
you're looking for every day. No, that's great, Khalid. Thank you very much. Before I let you go, I want to let all our listeners know about your podcast and where they can find it and what sort of people you talk to. So this
hmm
is your chance to sort of push your podcast to my listeners.
yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it for your time, and it's always awesome to talk to you, and your content is amazing. Also, for the people who listen and support you, definitely keep going and supporting him, because he always has great content. And in terms of my podcast, I mean, it's called the Martial Arts Show 2.0 for a reason. People might think, why the 2.0? Because it's not a typical martial arts podcast, what people may think. I just named it like that, so I don't have to think about a name all the time. But I really talk with all sorts of people. Of course, martial artists, like you mentioned, we both had Ray Thompson on the podcast, and John Hackleman, and a lot of other fighters or coaches. But I also talk with doctors, actors, stunt people, physical therapists, book authors, really all sorts of people, because I think there's so many interesting people in the world, so many interesting topics, and podcasts or books, they can really open your mind, and you can learn so much from that. And I have to say, in that last year when I really started, I learned so much just through the podcast, not university or school or anything. It's just, through the podcast, and it's interesting. So that's why I can imagine why guys like Joe Rogan are so smart, because in all these years doing that, how much you learn from your guests, it's crazy.
And you mentioned over the last year, how many podcasts have you done now?
I mean, I started last year, January 6th, doing it every day. And before October 2019, I did my first episode. And until January last year, I had 12 episodes or so. and then I did it every day, and I have now 559 podcasts. Yeah.
Awesome. Every day go on Instagram. There's always a new guest, and it's great that if you can't listen it, then you can go on to Spotify. You upload it a few days later or a few weeks later on Spotify. So it's great.
Yeah.
I'll put a few links on when this goes live. So this is fight week. So when it goes live, listen to my podcast. Check out Khalid's podcast. Find him on Instagram. It's a Taekwondo artist.
Yeah.
And I'll put the links as well. But thank you very much once again. Looking forward to US
Anytime.
264. And hopefully we're not too far wrong with our 3 main picks.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I am the greatest.
Be water, my friend.